Good evening, all, and welcome to Kalbardr's Corner for this special bonus episode of Consort Conversations. I am Lord Kalbardr Guyler, Companion of the Meridian Cross, Companion of the Argent Comet, Companion of the Compostela, and Reaper, coming to you live from the Barony of the Osprey on the southern coast of Meridies. Now, for this episode, my normal co-host is shifting to more of a guest role after a certain somebody had a really good day. It is my pleasure to welcome the newest heirs to the throne of Artemisia. Anybody who watches this channel will recognize their faces. Prince Sean Kirkpatrick Tarragon and Princess Qamar al-Nisa. Good evening, your highnesses.
Good evening, Cal.
Hello.
How are we, guys? How are things? So much has changed since last we spoke.
I know, right? So busy already.
So we're I guess a week out now, right?
Yeah.
How's the week been since? Let's start there, and then we'll sort of rewind a bit.
Well, we've just like every other kingdom, we are trying to get back on track after being offline or online for the last year. And so mostly focused on getting our events all put together so that they're official, get our timelines back together, and start moving forward.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's been a lot of business right off the bat.
That's good though, and I think that's it's good to see that people are really getting that business going, starting to find that normal again, or our new normal. And I know Artemisia is happy to have somebody with such experience in their corner now. So that's I'm super happy for you guys and super happy for the kingdom. And just I'm ecstatic for you guys to be here. I want to thank both of you for doing this. I know this was a bit of a curveball we threw out that I threw to y'all, but the minute I heard, I was like, we're doing an interview. So I want to
I'd like to thank Her Highness for having me on her show.
Of course, yeah. And also thank you to our guests that would have been on tonight that we've now rescheduled. Thank them for being flexible to allow us to do this. So
yes, definitely.
I want to just a quick thing to our audience. Audience members, this is your first interview with the new Prince and Princess of Artemisia. If you have questions, please throw them in the chat. We will try to address them if we can. If they can't, for various reasons, they'll let us know that. But we'll see if we can get an answer for you. But until then, I'll start with some of mine. So this is Consort Conversation. So I want to focus on a lot of Nisa, what you did during the day. Sort of what your feelings were and sort of what it felt like. Obviously, we can't leave Sean out as our guest from just push him off to the side. But this very much is a two-part conversation, right? And we want to hear both sides of this. So I guess talk us through the day. What was the going into this? What were your thoughts? How did you feel? The week leading up to it and the day of. What was your thoughts there?
Well, I knew, of course, we have our lists are published ahead of time because we have letters of intent. For our kingdom. So we know who's in the list, or at least who's put in a letter of intent. It doesn't mean everybody will show up that day. Usually most everybody does, though. And so we had an idea of who was in the list. Also remembering that anyone can have a good day and anyone can have a bad day. And that, of course, includes Sean. So never knowing what's going to happen. Had a fairly decent idea of who would come out of the pools. Was pretty close. There were a few that were kind of like, well, it could be this person or that person, and so going in, I knew that he would do well, assuming that he was on that day.
Right.
And then after that, you never know. So I get excited and I get nervous, and I really try hard not to put on him even my excitement, because he's going through his own stuff. Process. And so I try to just keep to myself how I'm feeling, other than he knows that, if I've given the green light to go and he's in with sword and shield, that he knows he has my support.
Right.
You tell me I can fight. I'm gonna fight.
Yeah.
There you go. So I guess, yeah. What was the conversation like ahead of time? Did y'all was this a Sean's like, "Hey, I want to do it," and Nisa's like, "You should do it." What was that? What was the conversation like?
It was basically like that. He
No,
always wants to fight Crown, okay? Because he always is looking for that competition and that test, right? And no matter who wins, he kind of wants to be part of that.
Right.
And that I understand.
But
And
she always has the final say-so as to what weapon form I'm fighting. And so, I mean, because I can't and won't do it without her and without her support. Because, once she says I can go, if you say I fight, I can fight, I'm going to fight. And I don't really have an off button. Mm-hmm. So we that's a discussion that we always have going into a list where we are fighting with intent. And she really has the final say on that, because I'm ready to go whenever. But her, I mean, it's a lot of work for both of us, and it's a lot of work, I think, for the consort, especially the day of, where you're kind of standing there as with the rest of the kingdom. The kingdom is standing there kind of like waiting with bated breath to see how this whole thing goes, and you have the two finalist consorts that are standing there like your whole life for the next 11 months is about to change. And we as fighters, we don't think about that. We're like, woohoo, I get to like hit people with sticks and not go to jail.
Right.
And meanwhile, they're on the side going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. So she always has the final say.
In that head of court, planning that, who's doing this, and you're just out there swinging sticks, right?
Yeah, so she always has the final say on whether or not we're fighting with intent. And once she gives me the green light, then it's an automatic process for me. Win or lose. I mean, I never assume that I'm going to win. I think it's extremely dangerous to think that I'm just going to roll through and steamroll the list, because I think that puts you in a position where you end up creating victories where they do not truly exist. Mm-hmm. And going into this one, knowing some of the people that we had to fight, like not taking anything for granted, not assuming that I'm just going to get past anybody, not assuming that we were going to win at all. And, I'm going to put out my best effort. And if we do, that's great. And if we don't, that's fine too. And hail to the new heirs. There
you go. Well, I think that's interesting. I actually never heard, I don't guess you and I ever talked about that, Sean. It's heard that you have going in with intent or without intent. Talk a little about that. So do you enter reigns that you don't intend to win?
Okay. So our name is always on the list for letters of intent. And depending on the quality of the list, I mean, one of the things that I always want to do in Crown Tourney, one of my objectives is twofold, really. It is to make sure that the list is clean and contested.
Right.
I don't want somebody to luck their way into it, and I don't want somebody to cheat their way into it. So I want to make sure the list is clean and contested. I want to make sure that whoever wins our Crown Tourney was true and properly tested. And the other thing that we do going into the list is every time I fight Crown Tourney, it is an opportunity to display to our kingdom the manner in which I think we should conduct ourselves in the list. And that means I'm either going to destroy everything in my path, or I'm going to accept my defeat with grace and dignity.
Right.
So that's my mindset entering the list and having my name on the list all the time, right? Whether or not we are prepared to do the job will determine the weapon system I'm using.
Right.
If I'm confident that the list will be clean and contested, I have the option to fight with the glaive. Has been my most recent thing that I've been playing with, and I think it would be super cool to win our Crown Tourney with a glaive someday. That'd be neat. But it's definitely a handicap for me. But at the same time, I am fighting every single fight that I have with my absolute best. And if I should be victorious in the list with that weapon, then so be it. And we do the job.
Okay. So you're not going to go in and throw a fight or fight less hard. You're just right because you can't. I've yourself.
I have tried in lesser tournaments. I'm like, I'm having a bye fight with this guy. Maybe I'll just kind of sandbag it, And then like 3 fights later, I'm all exhausted. And I've tried to take it easy,
right.
And I can't. I'm just not capable. Once you say tournament to me, and that sets a certain flag in my programming, and then I'm on.
That's fair. So, Nisa, for you, when he's fighting with intent or not, does it change your prep any on that?
A little bit, only, but well, a little bit, because if he's in the list, we're always prepared to do the job. Okay, so I just wanted to make that like super clear, like.
So yeah, which means you've got a checklist you're going to go through at that point. Where I need to do X, Y, and Z to make sure if it wins, I'm ready for it, right?
Yeah. Him fighting with a handicapped allows for me to breathe a little bit better and say, the odds of him winning this have gone down quite a bit,
right.
And so I can breathe a little bit easier and just relax a little more throughout the day. I'm still standing on the sidelines. I'm still watching all his fights. It's just a little less stressful unless he gets, depending on how far he is in the list.
Right. You're like round one, you're like, oh, whatever, hanging out, having a drink. Round two, you're like, wait, he's doing good. This is weird. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, crap. Hold on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that.
The stress level goes up the further he gets into the list. And then like this crown where we knew that I just said I was ready to do it again.
Sure.
And so he said, okay, well, I'm going to fight with sword and board. It did. And I just also wanted to make this point clear. If he's fighting for sword and board, it's not so much that the list isn't necessarily contested already. It's just that we're ready we're a little more prepared to do the job.
Right.
And more in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I don't. I'm sure there are people out there that might take the wrong. But I don't. I definitely. I heard it the way you intended.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it really clear that like.
Don't hold their words against them, people. Even though
all the caveat disclaimers that come along with all of those things, and we always know that it's a job, and if he wins, then we're willing to do it.
Yeah, and generally when we look at that, when we decide that we're ready to enter the list again. For instance, we'd taken a bit of a break a couple of reigns ago where we'd moved into a new house and started an alpaca ranch and yada, yada, yada. And then we had the 40th crown of Artemisia, which was our 20-year celebration, right. Which I wanted to make sure that I knew that I needed to be involved in that list. And somehow I didn't necessarily need to win it, but I needed to be involved in it. And after that point, once we decided that we're ready to serve, then basically I'll be in with my sword and board until we win again.
Right.
So how and that time I think I had 4 crowns that I was in before we won, after we decided that we were in. So again, we don't there's no assumption that we're just going to just roll in and I'm going to pick this one. It's just once we decide we're ready, then after that we're in a position to do it. And we're going to keep fighting until we win or not. Really, I mean, gentlemen of a certain age, there's going to come a point where I get to just compete and enjoy the competition and not have a job to do at the end of the day.
Right, makes sense. So let's start with the list. So this was the. I know I'd seen a couple fighter practices for Sean ahead of time, and a couple of things, but this was the first event back for a lot of people. What did that feel like putting the guard back on? What did that feel like walking out there and seeing the flags and feeling that? And how did it compare to past lists?
Surreal.
Yeah.
Incredibly emotional. Just that flood of being grateful that we can, and getting to see everyone that we've missed this whole time, and getting to interact and get hugs and just all of those type of things. It was amazing and beautiful, and it really makes you appreciate what we didn't have there for so long.
Right.
And the special and unique thing that we do have when we do have the opportunity to get together.
It really, it's sort of that dream came back for that minute.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Sean, as far as the actual list was concerned, how did it stack up to previous lists you were in? What was the quality?
And I noticed we just had a question from the Black Duke on that one, and I would say it was smaller in size in general. We usually average 16 to 20 ish. Our lists are not super huge.
Right.
But this list was absolutely top shelf quality wise. And I mean, top to bottom too. We had 14 fighters in the list, 3 royal peers, 3 knights, 8 unbelted. And so we usually do a pooled list. So we had 2 pools of 7 each, I think 7 or 8 with a bifighter. We had His Royal Highness Zipser from Edenvelt was with us, and I got him in my pool. Zipser is also brother to the person that I was in the finals with, Sir Gabriel. Mm-hmm. So Zipser was there, Gabe's there, Gabe's father, Robert Magnus from the Outlands, who has been king of the Outlands previously. He was there as well. So big family affair. So I got to fight Zipser, who, somebody I've been fighting for a long time. But as far as the people that were in a list from our kingdom, it was small, but the quality was top shelf. And I think more importantly, everybody, it was super clean. We tend to have pretty clean lists. Sir Gabe, who I finaled with, is one of the cleanest fighters you'll ever meet. Partially because he doesn't wear a whole lot of armor, and you hit him in certain spots and you don't want to get hit much there.
Right.
But he is super, super clean. He's super gracious. He's a quality fighter. So that was the finals. I think were really clean, and the whole list was. We had so many people. I think everybody was fighting above their station, above their caliber. I had some good, top quality fights in my pool. And
that falls back to not taking for granted that you think what's going to happen,
right?
And that you think the quality of the fight.
Right.
You can't assume that you are all in or you aren't.
Yeah. When it was a small enough list too that we had 2 pools of 7, and then we went straight to the semifinals from there. So typically with the pooled list we do quarterfinals, quarter semis, and finals. Best 2 out of 3 single elimination. Mm-hmm. But with it being a smaller list, we just went right to the semis. So 7 people in your pool, if you lose one fight and you're out. You lose more than one fight and you could be out.
Right.
In fact, the pool that Gabe was in, they had a 3-way final at the end to see who the 2 fighters were to come out, because you had 3 fighters who had lost to each other. So like Gabe beat Timur, Timur beat Thorhall beat Timur, and Timur beat Gabe. So they had to fight that off, right? And they all had 1 loss, right, in that pool. So they had to fight that out to see who was coming out. And I think that's a testament to the quality and the parity of the list as well.
Yeah, I know that there was a lot of concerns we had here in Meridia's, and sort of across the known world. I think the discussions were not concerns, but more of nobody knew what a lot of these lists were going to look like. People hadn't been fighting for a year. People have been working out, or they've been fighting, but with one person. So it could have been super sloppy. It could have been bad. It could have been, just all over. So I'm really happy to hear that you had a lot of lists were clean. I know Maria's, I think, the same way. We had our last list was super clean. Everything looked good. It was really well thought. And I'm happy to hear that, because I know that was a big concern. A lot of people coming out of these.
Yeah. And I think it's partially a product of people knowing that they're coming back into it, and knowing that the first crown that we've had in almost 2 years, needs to be good. It needs to be clean. It needs to be well fought. And I think you could feel that from everybody that was in the list. For so long, we've not had the opportunity to have, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. The pageantry, the moment.
Right.
And I think that was palpable throughout the list, where everybody who was in the list wanted to be part of that again, and understood the magnitude of presenting the show to the populace, and making sure that the populace had, could have faith in the process,
right?
And knowing that we were going to get it right, and it was going to be clean, it was going to be well contested, and it absolutely was.
Good. So you talked about the pool list. So you basically had 2 phases. You had your first pool, and you had the semifinals. Nisa, for you during that first pool, so what were you doing? How did you feel? What was your what were your nerves like?
Well, so I drink. That was a general statement, not a crown statement.
Honest here, folks. You heard it here first. There you go.
For those of you that don't know. I learned quite a while ago that anxiety is not best coped with by consuming alcohol in mass quantities, especially when it's something that big. Mm-hmm. So I balanced my day with coffee, water, and then I actually brought mimosas. So that's my thing. Like, that's how I do it. But I just make sure to balance everything out. So it gives me a little bit of, especially getting back into being with everyone. It felt good to relax just that little bit, but you don't want to lose control of what's going on. And be, yeah, I don't want to be all blotto, right? Like, I don't want to
be clear. I was not drinking mimosas during the list.
Right. Mimosas are for consorts only, not the fighters. Let's be clear here. Yeah.
But I just kept that balanced. And then that's why I brought that up, is just the balance of it.
Right.
So for the pools, I'm always there. I'm always watching. I stay put so that he knows where I am. We're really lucky because we are such a small kingdom that, we can set up all around the Eric. And so all the consorts have their little space and are set up all around the Eric. And that's one thing that we're really fortunate about. It's not a competition for space, which is nice.
Right. For those watching who are not from Artemisia or the West, the Eric is the list field where they fight.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, just clean that up. The list field.
The list field.
Please, or the Ulrich. We started calling it here Meridiers after.
As they say, in the West.
That's right, in the West.
So that's, the pools. I'm watching. I'm still nervous, especially when I know we have intent. When there's not as much. When he's fighting with a handicapped, I'm still watching, but I'm not as nervous.
Right.
And it's almost more for him. Because I know he wants to stay clean. I know that he wants a good show. But I also know that part of him wants to win. You have to kind of want that a little bit to be doing this, right? So, it's a nervous more for him. When we get to the semifinals, it's a little more nervous for me. Because then I know we've made it out of the pools, and this is where
the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
Well, at that point, you're 2 fights out. It's
yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is when I'm fighting in the pools, regardless of what weapon system I'm using, everybody has the same opportunity, right? We fight a round robin within the pool. You got to fight everybody. Like, there's 7 to 8 fights in that list. Like, you don't know,
right? You
don't know if you're coming out of that, especially when I'm fighting with a glaive. I've been pretty fortunate to come out, fighting with a glaive, but you just don't know. It is kind of the preliminary rounds, and you could lose those 2 fights and be done, and that's okay. And so when you get into the quarterfinals or the semifinals, that's when things get a little more serious. But I know for me, my process of salutes. My consort is a huge part of my process in competition, and part of that is when I salute the person whose favor I bear. It is a trigger point for me where I make that salute. I look at her. She is the last thing that I see before I do bodily harm. Right. And so
I'm not sure how to feel about that.
That's easy to hear, Sean. Just to be clear, don't make it better. But okay,
go wreck somebody. The last thing I see, and so it's like that's part of my process. And once I make that salute to her, everything disappears because I'm kind of a zone fighter, and everything disappears after that. We all have our mechanism for kind of going through that process, but she is very much a huge part of that for me, which is why it's really important that I just know where she is. And that's why she kind of stays in the same basic location, because I need to know where she is, and because that's just part of my process. And as soon as I make that salute to her, I salute my opponent, and then it is hammer time.
Yeah. So during the pools, do you have a fight that stood out? One that was a particularly good fight for you or for your opponent? One that you remember more than the others?
They were all great, obviously, but I think possibly one of my favorites in the pool was Sir Adi Aptam, who is somewhat recent to us in Artemisia. He's mundanely in the Air Force, so he's up at Malmstrom Air Force Base up in Great Falls. Super nice kid. We gave him his Citadel, which is our grant level fighting order in our last reign, and he was knighted shortly thereafter. He also happens to be the son of Count Micah Longbow, who was king of Aidenvelt. Micah was king of Aidenvelt when Brian Tarragon, my knight, won his first crown.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so Adi was like at the event at like maybe 10 years old,
right.
While I was Brian's first squire. And he's a great guy. He's turned into a really, really great fighter too. The fight I had with him was super, super fun. He's just such a joy to be with on the field. And I had one of those moments where, I legged him. I engaged him. I was really, really close. Couldn't hit anything. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to back off of this. And then, give myself a little breathing room and then finished it. But he's just such a joy. I mean, you can just feel how much he loves what we do and everything that he does. So they were all awesome. But I think Adi was definitely a highlight in my pool.
It's good. It's always good, especially to hear those highlights and hear the people that really enjoy fighting. I think that's important. And by the way, 26 minutes before we started talking about fighting, Sean. Check the time. Which admittedly for this show is pretty good. I was actually more impressive than the last one.
I mean, considering the topic.
That's right. All right, so you came out of the pools. Obviously, Sean hit the semifinals. Nisa, did your balance shift a little more towards mimosas at that point? Or
yeah, it did.
So does your process change anymore when it gets at that serious point?
I'm definitely a lot more focused because also at that point, there's obviously not as many fights in between. Mm-hmm. So, you got to stay focused. As he mentioned, that is part of his salute is part of his process. So I make sure that I'm just where I am. I pretty much don't move through through the whole thing, until, we do the procession for finals.
Right.
But I'm really, really fortunate that I often have at least one, if not two people with me that are taking care of me. Mm-hmm. So the consort almost needs, once you get into those higher levels, because I won't pick up my drink or they'll make sure I have water, keeping that balance. We joked that I was heavier on the mimosas, but I actually didn't. I kept the balance.
So yes, somebody handling coffee, somebody handling mimosas, somebody handling water. That's three people right there at least, right?
Right. And making sure that I'm still breathing.
Right.
Because I'm totally checked out. I'm like,
right, you're
I'm like, you doing all right there, baby? Oh, okay. Like I'm just.
And I'm gonna tell him yes, regardless of how I feel.
I'm like, cool. I'm gonna fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I really try to keep my anxiety to myself when it comes to that part.
Right.
Because he's in his, number one, I already know he's in his own zone.
Right.
So unless I'm like on the ground, he might notice then.
Yeah.
And I accept that. Like that's just part of his process. That's how he works. That's fine. And that's why I have other people there. So yeah, when you get into those higher or the end, towards the end of the tournaments, I almost become I become a less effective consort in some ways. And I rely on his squires and stuff to make sure that he's got water and that his armor is whatever, or out of the way, or whatever needs to happen that way.
Right.
Because I'm kind of checked out as a consort as far as taking care of him at that point.
And I'm checked out as a fighter.
Right. But you're checked out as a fighter from the go. So,
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So, okay, so I think that actually leads us to a topic that we may want to cover in a future episode of the prep beforehand, right? So the tournaments, the day of, whereas it's important and it's a lot of the work in there, but for y'all, for that point, you're actually talking about needing people for both you and him to sort of know that process up front and know ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
The squires need to know what he needs. Your we'll call it ladies in waiting, whatever. We need to know what you need at that point and how that balance maintains.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people involved and a lot of stuff up front. That it really takes a village, I think, at this point to do these sorts of things.
It does. It falls usually on the consort's immediate and the fighters' immediate households, I would say. Sir Gabe went into the finals with Sean, and Sarah's not her.
Sarah's her.
Okay. So, sorry. And Sarah was taken care of by her household in the same way that I was being taken care of by mine.
Right.
I mean, because I am aware enough that I was looking over and checking on her just in my peripheral vision.
Well, it was their first time in finals.
And it was. And,
Right.
and that's it's important to have all the things go right.
Right.
But she has a very strong household and she was well taken care of. And so I did see that, it does fall on the households at that point, to make sure that both the fighter and the consort are taken care of.
Yeah, because no matter what, if it's your first time or your fourth time, like there's a lot going on in the finals. There's a lot of emotion that goes on in the finals, and I mean, honestly, you're a bit of an emotional wreck, and like being able to, like, it's just really hard to like be expected to have your keep your shit together.
Right.
You're right. It does take a village, and especially if it's your first time in the finals of Crown. And again, she has a super strong household where the Duchess of the house is like, okay, here's how things work now. This is how we do this thing, and we're going to go over here, and we're going to take care of this, and and kind of guiding them. And honestly, there's a lot of, I mean, even for her having been in the finals several times, there's a lot of okay, yeah, and like you get those people that take care of you and they know your needs, and to some extent sometimes you just kind of, I'm just gonna go do what I'm told at this point, because like you just it is a lot. It is a lot to be a finalist in Crown Tourney, and it should be, right? I mean, there's a certain magnitude about the occasion that should be there. And it takes a lot of help.
Yeah. So let's start with the last fight. You mentioned Sir Gabe. So you went into that last fight. Obviously, you knew Gabe. I know Nisa and I talked before about that, and that was one of the big contenders. That was the only other name I knew in the list was Gabe. It was all right, Gabe's entering. That's a fight. That's going to be a fight right there. It's one of the ones you picked out, and sure enough, that was the finals. So, Sean, how was that for you, fighting Gabe? Obviously, somebody you know well.
Yeah.
What was your fight?
So Gabe had been squired to Duke Bela, the Outlands, currently His Majesty, as
Majesty, yeah.
a gentleman you might be familiar with.
Quite so, yes.
From one of your 14 shows that you do. So yeah, Gabe and Zipser had both been squired to Bela. So he's fighting with Amadou. He's super young. Super fast. I mean, fast like I used to be back when I was also in my 20s.
Right, when you were a young pup still, sir.
When I was a young pup like him, yeah. He is super enthusiastic. Him and Sarah, his consort, are both second generation SCA. So had they won, these are people that have grown up in the SCA. They know about it. They're not strangers to it. So had they won, they would be fine. But yeah, going into it, we had a practice up in Montana about 6 weeks prior to the list, where I'd had a chance to fight with Gabe, and I'd say at the time we kind of went 50-50. So I knew I was going to be in for a tough fight. And going into this list, she and I had talked about the fact that I knew I was going to have to fight him at some point.
Right.
And it was going to be late. It was either going to be the semis or the finals where I knew I was going to have to fight him, and I knew it was going to be a spectacular fight. I knew it was going to be good, and it was going to be clean. And so, yeah, going into it, I had no preconceived notions about how this was going to go. I think to some extent we had prepared ourselves emotionally for the possibility that he's going to have a good day.
Right.
And that he could potentially come out the victor, and that would be fine, and we would totally support that. And as it turned out, it went our way, but we were prepared for that to some extent. So after it was all over, I was there was a lot of feels. There was a lot of feels going on after I won that, because I'd somewhat prepared myself for that possibility of being defeated, which was fine. First event back after 16 months. Damon and Veronique are good friends of ours. They followed us in their first reign after Nisa's first reign. So they had followed us as crown. So now we're following them as crown. The being able to have everybody together, being able to contest in crown, overcoming what I knew was going to be a difficult opponent. There was so much going on. I mean, I was emotionally wrecked, honestly, when it was over. And again, he's super clean. He's super good. And it was as good as I could have hoped for in the finals. So it was great.
So final blow lands. You see Gabe drop. Nisa, what was your first reaction?
Okay, so going in, like Sean was saying, I knew Sean had minimal sleep because he had worked the night before, and he works nights, so he got off at 7 a.m.
I remember pictures leading up to that on the trip of Sean passed out in the back seat. So yeah,
yes. Yeah. And so I knew he's tired. I know Gabe's good. And so I was pretty speechless, actually, because it went a lot faster than I thought it was going to go. Because I've stood there sometimes when they're in the end of the second fight, and it's been 1-1, and I'm just like, they're starting the third fight, and I'm like, would somebody please? I don't even care who wins. I just need this to be over with.
Be done with it.
Like one way or the other, I just need to know. And that happened so fast. I was kind of just standing there, still processing the first fight.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, it can still go either way. And then Gabe fell. Well, he didn't fall over, but he was defeated, and I was like, did that just happen? So even though I've done it before, again, you don't go in with expectations,
right? And
it can go either way. So yeah, it's always that just happened, and now I have a job, and here we go. And a deep breath, and you walk out on the field and go from there.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me. And so I've never fought on the crown list. I've never set a reign. It's really cool for me to see, your fourth reign, Sean, your 75th reign or something.
I think it's about right. Yeah.
It's somewhere in that region. It's really neat to hear the weight. Like I can hear it in both of your voices as you talk about this. That even
every time
we're into it, it means so much still.
Yeah,
and that's really cool. So, Sean, you mentioned a fun factoid before the show started that you and two others have like a large chunk of the reigns of Artemisia now, and that's like so. How many of Artemisia have you had, Sean? What's your actual count?
So this is my 7th crown. Timur has been king 6 times, and Damon, who's our current crown, has been king 4 times.
Which was you said 17 of the 40, I think, of Artemisia.
40, yeah. We're the 47th,
right.
47th crown. Yeah. So the 3 of us are are 17 of those. So
That's
yeah.
all of
I
that.
know mine have been over, over the course of 20 plus years. Actually, with this one, I've now won crown in 4 decades.
Oh wow, that's interesting factoid. There you go.
Yeah, the 90s, the aughts, the 10s, and the 20s. So I mean, mine have been. I mean, we had between her second and third reign, there was like six years. Right. I think it was 6 years between reigns from her second to her.
Well, let's see. The 42nd reign.
That was our last one.
And I turned 42.
Yeah, that was.
This is the 47th reign.
But it was the one before that. It was 6 years between.
Yep.
And I will turn.
You can turn 47? Yeah, I can turn 6. Yeah.
Right before or right after?
Well, so this is the 47th reign of Artemisia.
Right.
This is my 7th reign. This is her 4th reign.
Oh, that's cute. Oh, look at that. Look at that. So speaking of past reigns, we actually had a question come in from Duke Christopher of Houghton. So during the last year, what have the two of you learned that you will do differently this reign from your previous reigns? So a lot of changes. What's come up for you guys?
I would think it's more about, because of COVID, we went into this tournament knowing that if we won, it's not just a regular reign, for lack of a better. I mean, every reign has its ups and downs, has its challenges. We generally don't go in with a, hey, we're going to do this thing for the kingdom or to the kingdom.
Sometimes to the kingdom.
when we reign. So, but our biggest thing right now is we went in knowing that coming out of COVID, we're going to have to work that much harder we want to really show off the dream and remind people why we love this and why we're going to come back after a year and still do it.
Right.
Yeah. As well as keep those that have joined while in COVID, because we've actually had quite a few new people poke their heads up and say, hey, we'd love to do this thing when you start doing it again. And so we really want to make sure that we hold on to those people. So those, I guess, if that was if we're coming in with an agenda, then that would be it.
All right.
To just make sure we all hold on to that dream and the fun and why we all got into this in the first place, or why they want to stay.
Yeah, this is we knew coming into this that this was going to be a difficult reign. Our kingdom has been very, very blessed in that our crown decided to do virtual events, which many kingdoms have not. Right. So we've kind of had this, we've had this online presence. And so now that we've had an in-person event, one of our objectives is to get back to in-person events. But, if a group cannot find a site, then we will do their event virtually if that's what's necessary. So we know there's going to be this kind of hybrid. We also knew going into this that there is always a possibility that this COVID strain, the Delta variant that's popping up, we could end up being shut down again.
Right.
And we know that we could be in here for a lot longer than a normal reign. Your reign lasts exactly as long as it's supposed to. Right. So one of our objectives is to get our calendar back on track. The events that could have been held out. It's like, not just having events, but there's paperwork that is involved in that, and we want to get back on track with that. And by the end of our reign, we want to just kind of have, among other things, we want to have regularly scheduled events, and be back on whatever that schedule is going to be. And at the same time, like she said, we want to remind people why we do this and why it is fun, and that we all enjoy each other's company as we study and research the Middle Ages and try to create the Middle Ages as they should have been. And so that's one of our focus. And And I don't know that that's necessarily. There are a number of things that we've learned over the last year that our eyes are open to a little bit more. But going into this reign, I think honestly, it's getting back to some semblance of normal, just getting back on track. And if we can start with, scheduled events, then later we can. I think it's going to be perhaps the reign after us, it's going to take us about a year and a half of regularly scheduled events to feel like any kind of normal again.
Right.
And I think it could take the next reign or the reign after that before we can really implement some of the things that have kind of come up during the COVID years.
Right. Yeah, it's very much in football they call it it's the rebuilding year. It's that getting back to that new normal. Because I think anybody who thinks we're going to get back to normal is crazy. Like you have to build a new normal.
Yeah. So let's start with at least regularly scheduled events, and let's get the calendar, set and scheduled out for this next 6 to, like when we were on the way home from coronation or from Crown, it was we can't have coronation where we thought it was going to be because we can't get a site for Labor Day weekend. So as soon as we get that settled, like we have Crown a month after that. So let's get that nailed down. And then coronation happens 6 months down the road. So like let's at least get those things done, and anything else that happens, just let's get back to a schedule. That's I'm looking forward to seeing what all the crowns are going to do. A lot of new crowns. I see a lot of new crowns. We actually have a lot of experienced crowns coming back. I know. So you guys obviously have a great experience. Nothing new to you. The new heirs here, Meridiers, Wolfson, Thorkatla, it's their second reign, so they've got some experience and some stability. I think that's really good. I think we're seeing a lot of that right now. People looking for stability, looking for that the normal to return, but also sort of find that balance. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do, and of course, Kalbardr's Korner is here to help however I can.
I do want to say, we're just really quick. Because there are still crowns. Obviously, we've got quite a few crowns, kingdoms that haven't had theirs yet. Mm-hmm. And that is, please, 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 if you've reigned before, awesome, right? Like you have an idea of the reigning side of it. And now you're going to probably be more focused on the getting back to some semblance of normal side of it. If you have not reigned before, if you are victorious in your crown, please reach out to your household, to your kingdom, to your officers. Let them help you. Do not be afraid to ask for help. There is a lot to learn in a first reign, just in general. Right. And then you throw in all of the COVID variant ways that we've been doing things, whether it's online or whatever your kingdom's been doing. So just remember that your kingdom is there and they are there to support you, and please utilize those people. That's what they're there for. They're there regardless of all the extra stuff, but especially with this reign. Right.
Yeah, I think seeing the kingdoms come together, seeing the peerages step up, seeing those the groups really make sure that stuff happens and stuff's getting done. I think it's been really neat through COVID, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that as we come out of this, or start to come out of this at least.
Yep.
So speaking of peerages, a little birdie told me that there's a new little birdie coming. So Sean, congratulations! You've been announced to join the Pelican.
Thank you.
So talk about that. Tell us a little about those.
Well, I can tell you that it was at the end of Their Majesty's final court at Crown, and right before all that, they had called up His Grace Timur, who's one of my former squires, who they called him up to recognize him for something, and I thought that was it. I thought that was the end of court. Mm-hmm. And then they said Their Majesties have business with His Highness, and did the thing. I am deeply, deeply honored and humbled to be asked to be part of that order. From what my wife tells me, this is something that has been in the works for 16 months now.
Nice.
So it's interesting that pretty much everybody but me knew.
I didn't know if it helps you, Sean.
Okay. Yeah, it's
It was announced. Well, not announced, but I knew long before I knew you, Cal. So sorry.
Fair. It's okay. It's okay.
So it was, like I said, deeply, deeply honored. And of course, we have from crown to coronation, we only have 2 months to get everything done. So there's a shortened timeline to begin with. There's very few events that are actually have the paperwork in and on the calendar. So we've decided to do my elevation at our coronation.
Okay.
So that'll be the first piece of business in Their Majesty's final court at coronation. Fortunately, having done this a couple of times and understanding the shortened timeline, understanding that like our coronation is going to be on top of an existing event because, with not being able to find a site for Labor Day weekend and everything, it was Queen. So we ended up doing it on top of an existing event that has had the same site for the last 30 years. And a little shout out, our greatest thanks to the Shire of Côte d'Ivoire for letting us pile on Harvest War there. And so that comes with some challenges as well, in that there are things that have to happen for coronation, but at the same time, we want to respect the fact that they are allowing us to do this on their existing event, and we want to make sure that they're able to do the activities that are traditional for that event as well. So I'm going to do my Pelican that morning, and then as soon as we're going to do first piece of business there. Give me a hot minute to get ready, but we're pretty much going to roll right into coronation as soon as they step down, and our coronation is going to be somewhat shortened, truncated, just because you need to get in and get the business done and get on with the events of the day. So,
again, with not wanting to take over Harvest War because it is an amazingly fun event, and we want to let them have their amazingly fun event. And fortunately, this is where reigning before kind of comes in handy, and actually having to have done a shortened coronation ceremony where you just hit the have-tos of the ceremony. We've been fortunate. We've done 2 beautiful coronations with
even Coronation the musical.
Yeah, So we've done.
Later. That's a story for later. Okay.
It was awesome.
It was awesome.
Okay.
But we've been fortunate where we've been able to have the really amazing coronations, where there's been a lot going on. But we've also had a coronation where it was over the top of another event because we had weather and couldn't go to coronation, the actual event. And so instead of taking over an event that was already happening, we just quickly did our coronation and moved on. And that's kind of what we're planning on doing this time. And I feel fortunate that I've had my big wedding day.
Right.
And so I can be perfectly fine with this.
Well, yeah, and that's actually the question that came up earlier is
sharing it with Sean.
Right. So you've done so many lead ups to reigns now, but it's you're having to plan not only the coronation on top of an event and planning an elevation.
Yeah.
That's a lot going on top of your normal business as crown, right? On top of having to do all the rest of the business.
Well, and having been at this a while, and I'd say more to the point, having done several elevations for others,
right?
At either a step up or a step down. I think it's. I mean, it's as. I don't know that it's an increased workload necessarily, because in fact we talked to their Majesties had placed somebody else on vigil the same day as me for a Pelican as well, and with all the scheduling and everything, we're going to end up doing that at coronation in our first court.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Because there's just not there's not enough events on the calendar, and like I mean that's again one of the difficulties of this particular reign is they have this thing that they wanted to do And the way the timing works out, we're going to have to do that after we step up. And so we will include their current majesties as much as possible in that ceremony as well. Doing it at coronation means everybody's already there. So we can do that. But, those are some of the vagaries of this type of like what's going on right now. And you have to be able to kind of adjust on the fly pretty quick. And, obviously their majesties thought highly of this lady and would like to and recognize her. We feel very strongly the same way. We're very supportive of her as well, and would be delighted to have them do it or for us to do it. But timing is that's you got to drop 5 and punt,
right?
And that's one of the things that's going on right now.
Yeah, I suspect we'll see a lot of that in the next 6 months, honestly, even to a year. I know Meridies is the exact same. Their highnesses are being coronated at Gadalop. They have hosted here in Osprey. On top, so we have the coronation, and I think at least one elevation, maybe 2. I don't know. I may have missed out. So there's a lot of that going on.
Well, and I'm kind of curious to see how many fighting elevations, whether it's rapier or heavy, happen this year. Just because there has been that pause. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that, like Sean was saying, we've been really lucky in this kingdom where we've had a heavy online presence. And so that's allowed our laurels and our pelicans and those that are on that track to still be able to show off their abilities. And so we've been able to continue to do those peerages where fighting is something that you need to be able to interact, you need to be able to travel. It's not an online thing. So it'll be interesting to see how many of those peerages are done in the next 6 to 12 months.
Right. No, that's true. Yeah, I don't envy any of the circles right now doing business and even throughout COVID and now coming back to how they're going to handle business. And I know a lot of it's like, obviously Sean's 16 months out is a lot of this is catch up for some of the circles too. So I know we'll see a lot of those starting to pop back up. The people that were being discussed that are now like, well, crap, we've been waiting a year to do this one. Let's get it done. I'll be curious to see how the sort of new conversations start. I mean, I won't get to see them, but I'll be curious to hear about them later in the year. They come up. So, all right. Well, we're just at an hour. So we don't have any more questions come in. I've done all my questions. You guys have any some final thought? Or actually, let me do this. I'll do business, then we'll do final thoughts. How about that?
Okay.
All right, so business, Kalbardr's Corner coming up. So obviously, coming up next on Consort Conversations, we'll be joined by, I'm not going to try to butcher their names.
Mavriki and Kaylee.
Okay, all right, Mavriki and Kaylee.
Mav and Kaylee.
Two amazing knights who will be talking about the What If We Both Fight? So 2 knights, both fighters, and fight for each other in crown lists. And as consorts. So I'm really interested to hear that conversation. I know I've had at least one couple I know of here in Mercedes that's done that. And we also had a couple of dukes that did it for each other one time too, just to say they did it. So I'm curious to hear how that goes and how that changes the conversation for these fights. So look for that. That is July 25th now. So again, thank you to them for letting us reschedule that.
Thank you.
And next Sunday, I'll be joined by my social media manager, my backstage lady, Lady Rune Fried Opersdottir, talking about invisible disabilities on Coffee with Cal. So all those things that are helping or hindering people from doing stuff in the SCA that maybe you don't get to see or aren't as common or aren't always visible to you on the day.
I'm looking forward to that one.
It affects my wife. It affects Runa. It's something that it comes up a lot, and it causes some controversy with people, especially when they need the accessibility or need the help, but don't look like they need the help. So I'm looking forward to that. Runa is an amazing person. I'm looking forward to sitting down and having coffee with her for that. Last but not least, if you want to support Kalbardr's Corner and KK Productions and everything we're doing, look us up on Patreon, patreon.com/KK Productions. Join our grand wall of patrons. I'd like to welcome our newest bishop-level patron, Elise Talamesh. She is here in Meridies, just joined us as a bishop. I actually haven't even done her shout-out yet, so I'll get her shout-out here on the page here shortly. And we have the third quarter rewards going out, hopefully here soon. So look forward to that. Jump on there. We've got some cool stuff. I've just got some new stickers printed, so those are going out. Speaking of stickers, look us up on Redbubble. Redbubble, search KK Productions. And of course, since Sean's here, I will pimp out the Do Nightly Things sheets. Don't forget those. There you
I
go.
understand there's a comforter too.
Yeah. It's like a comforter sheet thingy. So yeah, it's hilarious. To look at. Yeah. Look, I'm not fancy enough for a duvet. It's something that goes on your bed. It's funny. Just go look at it. All right. That's all I got. So yeah. So Your Highnesses, final thoughts on Consort for this episode, please.
I just want to say that, there are all kinds of levels of consorting. Being a consort, being an inspiration. Sometimes it means standing on the side of the field. Sometimes it just means being in their heart. Sometimes it means them wearing your favor. Sometimes it means doing a job. So as we've discovered, as we've gone through this is a much larger subject than I even realized. And so please, if anybody has any questions or anything that they would like to tackle, please reach out to us. I'd be more than willing to look into it and see what we can do.
We actually did have a question come up that I'm going to be posting on the page this week. We had the question came up was about consorting for non-martial activities. So that was a question. So I'll be posting that out to the Kalbardr Corner page. So check that out, and we'll get some opinions, and we're actually looking for a guest for it. So if you know somebody who does that, reach out to us. Sean?
And of course, it would not be an episode of Consort Conversations if I did not take the opportunity to say Nisa is super dreamy, and I would totally fight for her.
There it is. We've officially had an episode now. Your Highness, I want to thank you both for joining me this evening. You have been a delight for the last 6 months to a year that I've known you, and I'm sure you'll be a delight for the Kingdom of Artemisia in the next year. So thank you for your service to the crown.
Thank you, Cal.
Thank you, Cal, for all you do.
And of course, thank you to our viewers for watching. We love you guys all. Please tune in next week and every other week since then. I'm going to keep on the air as long as you'll have me. This has been Sean, Nisa, and Cal in Kalbardr's Corner. Good night, everybody.
Night.
All right.